buckle up because I'm about to tell you exactly how to defeat one of the nastiest threats in all of Warhammer. This is a army that is really causing trouble for people all throughout the meta. It's super powerful, it's super terrifying, and I'm going to teach you exactly how to beat it today. So this is an episode of How to Beat. Guys, if you love this content, like, subscribe, share it with your friends, because I am going to bring you top-notch Warhammer 40k advice that you typically have to pay for coaching for. And by the way, if you are looking for coaching, you can pay me for it. But this is some free advice just for everyone because I love you all and I want to raise the level of Warhammer throughout the world. As I do believe that Warhammer 40,000 is not, well, we know that it's the preeminent miniature gaming war game in the world, but I believe it will one day become the preeminent strategy game in the entire freaking world. So let's talk about the Legion of Excess. Slaanesh, the new demons. This is a massive meta threat, and if you're not prepared for it, they will crush you at every single tournament you go to, and every single TTS league that you play in, and every single time you go to sleep and you close your eyes, you're going to be tormented by the Legion of Excess. So this is a exceptionally fast army. You have the monsters that can walk through walls, they can heal. Almost everything in the army has dev wounds. Almost everything in the entire army has full rerolls to hit and wound. How can man hope to stand against such evil? Well, Happy Corrupt and Wargaming has it figured out for you. So let's talk about the strengths of this army. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go step by step through some enhancements, some stratagems. But this is not a review of how the army like you may have seen in some other videos. This is specifically how to counter everything. So I'm going to talk about the units, but I'm going to be talking about how do we counter them. And then I'm going to be using the TTS view itself to show you specifically how to ruin the entire general game strategy. And that'll be towards the end of the video. So buckle up. The strengths of the list. Here it is. Damage. Everything in this army can choose to give up fights first when they charge in exchange for full rerolls to hit and wound. Can you say scary? Well, it is exceptionally scary. Now, it's called the Seductive Gambit is the name of this ability, by the way. It only works when you end a charge move, okay? So what is a charge move? Charge moves are when you heroic intervene or when you normally charge. So any charge move you can do this on. The unit does not have the fights first ability when they do this, if they choose to do this. But instead, each time a model in the unit makes an attack, it can reroll the hit roll and reroll the wound roll. What this means is it will fight in the fight's normal step. A lot of people have some problems with this. So they think that you just don't get the fights first ability from charging, which would be the charge bonus, which is very specifically written in the rules. But it also includes just normal fights first, because it says specifically you don't get the fights first ability. So if you have, say, the Mask of Slaanesh, which has fights first innately, if the Mask wants to also reroll all hit and wound rolls, it will lose the fights first ability, even though it's on its status sheet. But when you choose reroll all hits and wounds in melee, this will make Fiends specifically, who have dev wounds, the hardest hitting unit per point in the entire game. And if you're curious about that map, I put a video earlier today which breaks it all down for you. It is terrifying. I'll try to link it in the comment, or maybe I'll link it down below, in either the description or the comments. Something, it's gonna be in a place. You'll find it. So the first strength of this is damage. It can kill anything. As the question is, can you kill it? The answer is yes, it can. Like Bob the Builder, right? Then the second big strength hit we have is speed. This is a fast freaking army. Now, they don't really have access to advance to charge outside of like the Mask, which doesn't really matter, but everything is quick. Fiends specifically, which are beast, they can walk through walls just like infantry because they're beasts and they can breach, right? So they have 12 inches of honest movement, which is very, very strong. Then you have things like the Keepers of Secrets, which move 14 base, but they're a monster, which makes it really hard for them to go around ruins. Oh, no, there is a stratagem to allow them to walk through and charge through walls. It is very, very powerful. You can use it with any unit, including monsters, vehicles, mounted. So what does that mean? That means soul grinders are on the table for this army. And actually, I'm going to specifically go through soul grinders because soul grinders get nasty in this detachment. Let's talk about some more strengths that they have. So they have actually very powerful battle shock control. So they do have the Shadows of Chaos army special rule, which is the same as all demons. But don't forget just how powerful this is. Because whenever your enemy takes a leadership or a battle shock test within the Shadows of Chaos, they will be at -1. And when they fail, they are going to suffer D3 mortal wounds. And forgive me, it's actually just battle shock, not leadership. I know I just said leadership. It's just battle shock. So if they fail a battle shock, they're going to take D3 mortal wounds if they're within the Shadow of Chaos. Now, the way that your army has the Shadow of Chaos is if you control half or more of the objectives in No Man's Land, you'll always have Shadow of Chaos in the Demon's player's deployment zone. And if they control the objective in your opponent's deployment zone, then that will also be within the Shadow of Chaos. In addition to that, all of the greater demons, Keeper of Secrets, Shalaxi Hellbrand, will also be giving off 6 inches of Shadow of Chaos. So anytime any model has to take a battle shock test for any reason, and they're within 6 inches of a Keeper of Secrets, it's going to be at -1, and if they fail, they're going to suffer D3 mortals. Now, as you'll find out, they have specific stratagems and ways to force more battle shocks with this army, which is a big problem for tons of armies, whether it's going to be Necrons or Orcs or whatever. Now, for the Slaanesh demons, on the other hand, if they pass a battle shock while they're within the Shadows of Chaos, they're going to get +1 to that test, and they get to heal D3 or regen D3 models if it's battle line. That is a lot. So they get massive benefits from Battle Shock, and there are Battle Shock mechanisms in this detachment. And then there are just going to be tons and tons of hit and wound modifiers to distribute. Sustained hits, +1 to wound, +1 to hit, -1 to hit, -1 to hit. It's all over the place in this codex. I'm going to break all that down for you today. Let's talk about a few of the weaknesses. And this is general weaknesses, and now I break everything down more in detail in just a little bit. So there's almost 0 shooting in this detachment. Basically, you've got Soul Grinders, and you get Keeper Secrets, and like Celeste kind of has some shooting, but there's more or less no shooting. So the army does actually really suffer to armies that can do a lot of move blocking. Think Admech, for example. Admech actually has quite good play into the Slaanesh army. But don't forget, they can actually take other demons. They don't have to take only Slaanesh demons. It's just that the other demons, whether it be Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, they simply don't get any detachment or stratagem support for being in this detachment. So one thing that I've done with my demons of Slaanesh when I play them is I bring a unit of Plague Bearers, because Plague Bearers will sticky my home field objective, and then they will just move off the screen and do things while the rest of my army runs forward and just massacres. They also have a relatively low unit count. Some of these units are very expensive. Even though they have insane damage output, they're not super tough. So this can be a 9 to 11 unit army will be generally the norm. It's possible to get a little bit few more. It's possible to actually have less. So but be on the lookout for that. And then toughness. So they are not tough. However, they have lots of ways to skew the math to make their toughness just a little bit more than you might expect initially, and we'll talk about all of those. So let's talk about some of these enhancements, and I'm going to run these enhancements down because you have to understand how they work, because it's going to be buffing the entire army. So the one that is really important, this is the one that is critical, is False Majesty. This is an aura, and you can put it on any Slaanesh model, so that includes Keeper Secrets. However, it doesn't apply to monsters. It applies to everything else, including vehicles. Hint, hint. Every single Slaanesh unit that's not a monster that is within 6 inches of the bearer, they get +1 to wound in melee. This is so powerful. This is brutally powerful. This makes Daemonettes, who are only strength 4, +1 to wound. Suddenly they are wounding big giant monsters and Bane Blades and things on 5s, and that is a critical break point. You stack with dead wounds, they could do other things as well. So this is an amazing enhancement that you're going to see in every single list. It's going to be a little bit different who takes it. Typically, and I'll talk about this when I go over the units, but you're probably going to see it either on a Keeper of Secrets, or you're going to end up seeing it on the Torment Bringer on Exalted Seeker Chariots. Some people might put it on one of the little leaders for the Daemonettes, but that's pretty unlikely. Then you have the Dreaming Crown, which is fine. I don't think it's really that necessary, but it's fine. It's similar to False Majesty in that it's a 6-inch aura, and it adds +1 to hit. Now, for 30 points, you're just probably not going to see this quite as often. Some people are taking it. I'm seeing it around in several lists. I just find it much less really necessary, to be honest with you, seeing as most of the army is going to be wanting to reroll hit and wound rolls anyway. Then you've got the Avatar of Perfection. This is pretty cool. You can only put this on a Keeper. And at the start of each phase, if there are no other friendly units within 6 inches of the bearer, you get to reroll Advance and reroll Charge rolls. You also get to ignore any roll modifiers to move characteristic, advance, or charge. This is really strong on our Keeper Secrets. So if you see this on a Keeper Secrets, understand that, you know what? That's the unit that can just go for those 9-inch, 11-inch charges, and it can be really good. You stack this with the ability for the Keepers to move through walls. Ooh, boy, can they get some movement that you're not expecting. And the last enhancement is actually super good. So this works on the monster, so you can put this on a Keeper. And at the end of the fight phase, if one or more enemy models were destroyed as a result of one or more of the bear's attacks, it can use this enhancement and regain up to D3 lost wounds. That means these monsters heal. Now, just as a little bit of a preview for you, because I'm going to go in depth on the Keeper's Secrets, because it's critical to the way the army functions. This thing, this thing has 18 wounds, a 4-pin vulnerable save. It has a 5-up feel no pain. It's -1 to be hit with toughness of 10. It heals D3 wounds every time it passes a battle shock test, which it's going to be at +1 to pass because it's always inside its own aura of it's always within the Shadow of Chaos because it gives off an aura of the Shadow of Chaos. It'll heal D3 wounds each time it passes a battle shock test, and it'll heal D3 wounds every single time it kills a model. So they heal, they're tough, it is a big problem. So this is an amazing enhancement that you're going to see. Now let's talk about some of the stratagems, and you just need to have an understanding of the way these work because I'm going to reference them a lot when I'm going through the unit data sheets and some of the strategies that we're going to use against Slaanesh. Okay, so Thieves of Pain is a really, really powerful one. Basically, any phase just after a mortal wound is allocated to a Slaanesh unit, that's not a monster. That's really key. So you can't use this on you cannot use this on Keepers of Secrets. You just select any other Slaanesh unit that's within 12 inches of your unit, and until the end of the phase, while the selected unit is on the battlefield, each time a model in your unit would lose a wound, instead, you're going to inflict 1 mortal wound to the selected unit instead. Now, there is a stratagem, or there is a strategy, I should say, where you're going to take a very specific leader, which we'll talk about in a little while, who, when she leads Daemonettes, she gives them a 4-up feel no pain against mortals. So let's say that you're shooting a bunch of shots into a unit of fiends because you want to delete those fiends. They can pop Thieves of Pain and just pass all of that damage off onto the Daemonette squad that all has a 4-up feel no pain against mortals. It's very powerful, and it can do horrible, horrible, terrible things. Another thing that you can do it with is you can stack this with your stupid Soul Grinders. Yeah, I know. Soul Grinders, people don't talk about them. Soul Grinders in this detachment become disgusting because Soul Grinders do not have the monster keyword. They have the vehicle keyword. So you can pass this off to Soul Grinders. Brutal, right? Then you got Phantasmal Longing. This allows you to move through a wall. You can do it in the move phase or in the charge phase. This is wall walking, Kool-Aid Man, however you want to call it. It's incredible. It enables Soul Grinders. It enables the Chariots. It enables the Keeper of Secrets. And we're going to talk about the Chariots. Trust me, we're going to talk about the Chariot. Well, we're going to talk about one Chariot in particular. Then we've got Archagonist. Now, this is an incredible stratagem that can... You're either going to select one Keeper of Secrets, or you're going to select any 2 other Slaanesh units, and you're going to give them +1 to wound. Very strong. So if you happen to be outside of the aura of your False Majesty, that's giving +1 to wound, or you happen to be the Keeper of Secrets, you can just give them +1 to wound. And there's another way to get +1 to wound as well, which we're going to talk about with unit combinations. All right, let's talk about some of the other stratagems, because these are the ones that really affect gameplay quite a bit. Cavalcade of Blades, no big deal. It's a fight and death. Or, sorry, not fight and death. Forgive me. This is a tank shock, right? So select one enemy unit within engagement range of your unit, then roll 1d6 for every model in your unit that is within engagement range, or roll 6d6 instead if it's a monster. Every 4-up, it's a mortal wound. So monsters roll 6 dice, every 4-up's a mortal, and then normal units, just everything in engagement range. So they basically become jump pack assault intercessors. Sensory excruciation. This is pretty brutal. This is a very, very interesting stratagem, which can just ruin games for people. So basically, you have to target one monster. So it has to be a Keeper Secrets, because those are the only monsters in this army. Now, every unit on the battlefield that's within your army's Shadow of Chaos must take a Battle Shock test. At -1 if they're below half strength. Now remember, Shadow of Chaos is this is so powerful. This is just so unreasonable powerful. Anyone who fails just suffers D3 mortal wounds and they're battle shocked. Now, this doesn't only apply to the enemy. This also applies to all of the Slaanesh units. So let's say you have a bunch of Slaanesh units that are walking around and, I don't know, some Keeper of Secrets are, a little bit wounded and they want to heal up a little bit. They can pop this stratagem and they will pass on a 5-up because they have leadership in 6, but since they're within the Shadow of Chaos, they're at +1 and they just heal D3 wounds. So you can battle shock your entire armies, well, not your entire opponent's army, because it's going to be hard to battle shock units in their deployment zone. But if you have Shadow of Chaos in the no man's land, you can theoretically battle shock like 75% of your opponent's army every single battle round. This is unreasonably powerful stratagem. You can also screw yourself a little bit if you roll poorly, but you can also just heal and regenerate your models if you don't roll poorly. So, and then lastly, we have Overwhelming Excess, which can just ruin games for opponents. If you are an elite shooting army, you have to pay attention to the stratagem. You have to. So your opponent's shooting phase. So let's say, and I'll just give you a great example. I was running my Death Watch in a tournament, and I had my Talon Strike squad jump down to just annihilate a unit of fiends, and they pop this stratagem. So what it does is it forces the attacking unit to take a battle shock test at -1. Now, if the test is passed until the end of the phase, each time a model in the attacking unit makes an attack that targets them, subtract -1 hit. So it gives -1 hit if they pass the battle shock. If they fail the battle shock, first off, if they're in the Shadow of Chaos, they're going to take D3 mortal wounds. But second off, now they can't shoot you, and they have to select a new target. So if you drop a unit down to delete one unit and you don't have alternate targets, you just can't shoot. You just won't be able to shoot. And this can just end games right off the bat. So it's an extremely powerful stratagem. It's so brutally strong. So you need to, when you're playing against Slaanesh, you're going to want to make sure that you give yourself multiple targets. Do not give yourself just one target, because if you fail it, you're just not activating this turn. And you're battle shocked, which sucks. So if you got to get battle shocked, at least you should have a second target to be able to shoot. This really screws Marines who are wanting to use, like, Oath of Moment. So like, hey, I'm going to nuke this unit. Actually, you're not even shooting that unit with your strongest shooting, whatever. All right, those are all the stratagems. So let's talk about some of the characters and some of the units in this army, how they synergize, and what we have to do to counter them. All right, so this is it. This is the Keeper's Secrets. You're going to see 2 in every single list. You might see some lists that run 3. It's possible that you see 1, but most of the lists are going to be running 2. Personally, I think this is the perfect bearer for the healing enhancement, because these guys murk elite infantry. All their attacks are flat 3 damage. So you're going to take the snapping claws. So they're always going to have a wit sealer stored and the snapping claws. You're never going to take the ritual knife. You're always going to end up taking the little shield thing, which is Shining Aegis, which gives them a 5 Feel No Pain, okay? So it's always going to be 6 attacks at strength 8, AP 2, damage 3, but it's actually going to go to AP 3, because if you read their special abilities, while a friendly Slaanesh demon is within 6 inches of the model, improve the AP of melee weapons by 1. So they're always within 6 inches of themselves, so they're always going to be at AP 3. So they have 6 attacks, strength 8, AP 3, damage 3, and then 4 more attacks, strength 6, AP 3, damage 3, that are dev wounds. Now, when this girl pops off and she just decides to reroll all hit rolls and reroll all wound rolls, she is annihilating everything. She starts fishing for those dev wounds. It's just disgusting how much damage she gets. And don't forget, you've got multiple ways that you can give her +1 to wound. So basically what you get is you get a move 14, T10, 4-up invulnerable save, 5-up Feel No Pain, 18 wound monster that heals potentially like 2d3 a turn, and she annihilates any elite infantry in the entire game. She's always -1 to be hit. You can also, because of the combination I'm going to teach you on the next slide, make them -1 to be wounded, and there will be +1 to wound whatever they're hitting. It's disgusting. So basically, any enhancement works well. They can take the False Majesty, which is the one that gives +1 to wound, but it won't affect her because she does have the monster keyword. But she can do it just to provide it to everyone around her. That's an option. Typically, it's going to be on a better unit, which I'll talk about in a little while. So let's talk about the mask, which is the combination that makes this girl also -1 to be wounded and +1 to wound without having to use any stratagems or anything at all. So the mask, you're going to see this in every single army. The mask freaking rocks. It has deep strike, fights first, loan up. At the start of the fight phase, you just have to select one enemy unit within 6 inches of this model. And until the end of the phase, all Slaanesh demons add 1 to the wound roll against that unit, and every time a model in the enemy unit makes a melee attack, subtract 1 from the wound roll. So you just give out -1 to be wounded, or -1 to wound, and you make all of your Slaanesh demons at +1 to wound them. Then this model also has advance, fallback, and charge, which is just awesome. She's an 85-point lone up with 6 attacks, strength 4, AP 1, damage 2, but remember, if she wants to, she can just, reroll hit and wound rolls. It's disgusting. And just having fights first makes her really hard to deal with if you're sending in skirmishing units. So if you're sending in like Storm Boys or whatever, then sometimes she can just pop off and kill them because she has fights first. Then let's talk about Shalaxi. Shalaxi is the specially named Keeper's Secrets. Shalaxi is much less seen than Keeper's Secrets because she's very freaking expensive. I believe she's like 425 points. She might be 450, but I think she came down just a little bit. Still wildly expensive. But she will absolutely nuke whatever she wants to charge, and she does not need to give up fight first to do it, because she innately gets to reroll all hit, wound, and damage rolls against monsters, vehicles, and characters. It is disgusting how hard this model hits. And remember, she gets to walk through walls due to the stratagem in the Legion of Excess. She also gives off the aura of Shadow Chaos. And she has the Cloak of Constriction, which will make any enemy unit within engagement range, or one enemy unit, -1 to their attack characteristic, which is absolutely brutal. So one of the cool things about taking, or one of the terrifying things about having Slaxi is that it makes them, they have a big unit that doesn't have to give up the fight's first ability to just annihilate a unit, because they have the inbuilt rerolls, which is just really, really strong. Now, she actually does have a Feel No Pain of 5 up, but she does not have -1 to be hit, which is actually kind of makes her easier to kill. So even though she has 2 extra wounds, since she's not -1 hit, it does make her easier to kill. So pay attention to that. These are those units that you just really want to nuke down. It's very expensive, and it does take a ton away from your enemy. Now let's talk about Shalesk. Shalesk is a weird model. It's like 2 models put together, but it does get a leadership bonus if it leads Daemonettes, but I would expect to see her solo, because when she dies, she comes back to life on a 2-up with full wounds remaining, and that's 9 wounds with a 4-up invulnerable save and just a flat 3 damage weapon. It's just a very tough unit that you're going to have to deal with twice, which is really annoying for, honestly, not that much. I think she's 110, 115 or something like that. Now, her buff is really powerful, but make sure your opponent is playing it correctly, because a lot of people will play her stronger than she actually is. So if you read her buff, while this model is leading a unit, each time a model in that unit makes a melee attack, a successful unmodified wound roll of 5 up scores a critical wound. This only dev wounds, mind you, and this is in the core rules and or it might be the rules commentary, where it very specifically says that you can only proc dev wounds on unmodified critical wound rolls, right? So if you have a Daemonette who has a strength of 4 and she's hitting a Vindicator, for example, she would require 6s to wound. Even if she's +1 to wound, now she requires 5s, but you don't get devastating wounds on 5s because the +1 is a modifier that allows you to wound them on 5s. So dev wounds specifically require it to be an unmodified, and if you still don't wound on 5-ups, you don't proc the devastating wounds. Now, a lot of people are going to not understand this as I explain it here. I get it. You're going to put down in the comments below that I'm wrong. I'm not. I'm 100% correct. Checked with literally every top judge like I can think of in the entire world. Checked with all the GW dudes, all the WTC guys. This is the correct way it works. They will not get the 5-up dev wounds unless they can naturally wound on 5s. So argue in the comments if you want. I probably will just comment with I love you, but I'm not going to fight you on that one because I'm just right. So that's Shalesk. So super frustrating unit to see in your backline, because it drops down in turn 4. If you don't have anything that can kill a monster that is that strong in your backline, you're kind of screwed because you're going to have to kill them twice. So watch out for Shalesk, basically. Screen. Then we have the Comported Epitome. Now this Comported Epitome, this thing is really annoying. So if you look at their ability, Swallow Energy, while this model is leading a unit, models in that unit have Feel No Pain 4 up against mortals and psychic attacks. This is the unit that I was talking about, which is going to be utilizing the Thieves of Pain stratagem, and they're going to basically make it almost impossible to kill Soul Grinders and your Fiends and Chariots. Now, it doesn't work on Keepers of Secrets because you can't use that stratagem to protect monsters, but you can use it for everything else. So basically, whenever you cause any damage to the Soul Grinder or the Fiends, as long as they're within 12 inches of this character's unit, which will be Daemonettes, then every time they take damage, they can just pass it off onto this unit, and this unit has a 4 Feel No Pain against mortal wounds and psychic attacks. It's so powerful. It is so powerful. Like, Magnus wants to look at the Soul Grinder and say, you're gone? No, actually, Magnus killed like 6 Daemonettes, and that's about it. It's amazingly strong. Let's talk about the Torment Bringer. Torment Bringer, our Exalted Secret Chariot. Now, this is probably the strongest buff piece in the entire army. If you see this piece on the battlefield, you have to kill it. This is the piece that's going to give sustained hits 1 to everything, and it's going to give +1 to wound to everything that is not a monster. This will actually increase the damage output of a lot of the units in this army by well over 50%. We're talking 60, even 70%, and sometimes where there's some breakpoints, it's disgusting. Now, it's very hard model to move just because it's massive, but it has Deep Strike. So you can always rapid ingress it, and you can always move it 14 inches through walls using the stratagem to move through walls in this army. Damn, it's strong. If you have the opportunity to nuke this thing, you have to nuke it. Slaanesh Demons, when they get sustained hits and +1 to wound, when they get to full reroll hit rolls and wound rolls, are the hardest hitting things in the game. So watch it. Transweaver is the last character we're going to talk about. Now, you're not going to see her very often. It's just hard to find the 60 points for her just because everything else is pretty expensive. But if you do see her, basically what she'll do is she'll give the D minutes she's leading fights first. And then at the end of your movement phase, you can select one enemy unit that is battle shocked and within 12 inches. And until the end of the turn, each time any Slaanesh Demons model from your army makes an attack that targets that enemy unit, you can reroll the hit and reroll the wound roll. So this is actually, she does enable people to more or less take advantage of the detachment rule without having to give up their fights first ability. So there is uses, and you will see them. It's just you're not going to see them that much, simply because they're very fragile, and it's just hard to find 60 points in this army. Thank goodness. It's hard. Now, day minutes. Day minutes are little murder buckets, which most people don't like, and I'm in love with them. I think they're unbelievably powerful. They will murder everything. And I showed the math on it on my previous video, so if you want that math, you can go check that out. Actually, maybe I'll just show that to you right now because it's just fun. I want to kind of show it again. So if you have 10 Daemonettes with Slashing Claws, now this does give them sustained hits, and it's going to be giving them +1 to wound. But look how much damage they do. To Marines, 10 Daemonettes will cause 22.2 damage. To a Vindicator, they're going to cause 13.9 or 14 damage. It's wild how much damage these things do, and they're 100 points. Like, wow. So Daemonettes freaking rock. However, they are very flimsy, and this is going to lead us into one of the ways that we, excuse me, that we're going to have to deal with the Slaanesh demons is that they are all pretty darn flimsy, and if they want to give up their fights first, you have the ability to strike first, not fights first, but strike first in the fight's normal step, because the person who activates is always the non-active player activates first in each step of the fight phase. So if Slaanesh charges in and decides that, hey, I want to reroll all hit roll and wound rolls, your unit that was charged will get the opportunity to fight before their unit will. It's a little confusing, but I'm going to go in depth on that in a few more slides to make sure everyone has that crystal clear. So it's very easy to interrupt and just murder these Daemonettes. So they are exceptionally flimsy, and they die to any shooting. Their only defense is a 5 of invuln, and they're T3 with 1 wound. So you can murder them, don't worry, but they can also murder you. Fiends. All right, now Fiends are the highest damage potential unit in the entire game per points spent on them. So that's called PPP, and I outlined that definitely in my previous video today where I went through all the math hammer of this. Seriously, just go watch it. It's disgusting. Now, they're not the hardest to kill, but they are awkward to kill because they are that T5 with a 4 up, with 4 wounds and a 5 invulnerable save. They're also going to be -1 to be hit as long as you're not a vehicle or Titanic unit in melee, right? So that's really, really can make them awkward to kill. Like, there's not many units that are just good at putting down 4 wound models. So watch out for Thieves of Pain, the stratagem, which allows them to pass off wounds to that Daemonette unit that's going to have a 4 up against mortals. Watch out for that, because what these fiends will do is they're going to run into combat against your nasty unit, and they're going to say, I'm going to not fights first, but I am going to get full rerolls to hit and wound. And when you look at this, 5 attacks, full rerolls to hit, full rerolls to wound, they're going to be probably with sustained hits and +1 to wound due to either stratagems or enhancements, whatever. They'll have it, trust me. They can kill anything in the game. So watch for those Thieves of Pain to make it so that you don't kill them first, because you're going to say, aha, silly boy, I'm going to go ahead and hit you before you hit me since you gave up your fights first. And then your opponent's going to say, avast, have that, ye matey. I'm going to activate Thieves of Pain. And Thieves of Pain is going to pass off all those wounds onto the Daemonettes that are going to have a 4 up against mortals. You're going to kill the Daemonette squad. He doesn't care. And then you're going to kill like 1 fiend, and then the fiends are going to wipe your 400-point brick. It is disgusting how it works. Then we have Seekers. We don't have too many more. I think we've only got like 2 more slides of character of units, and then I'm going to start getting into general strategy, and I'm going to show you on TTS exactly how I want you to position to counter all of this, okay? Seekers have Psycho Speed, so watch out for them jailing you. As a matter of fact, you know what? Why don't I just go ahead and show you what I mean by jailing you? So these guys have Scouts 9, which means they get to move 9 inches at the start of the game, and then they can move 14 inches. They have an Instrument of Chaos, which gives +1 to charge, and they also get to reroll charges. So turn 1, they can basically be wherever they want to on the entire battlefield, and while they are mounted, you have a stratagem to allow them to move straight through walls. So you need scouts and infiltrators of your own to block their crazy scout move, because otherwise they're going to jail you. I'm going to go to the TTS screen right now just so I can show you exactly what I mean by jailed, because I don't want you to have to struggle with this, because it probably will happen to you at least once, but I want to protect you from it happening. So let's just take like these Seekers here. So ignore all the stuff on the table right now. I just want to kind of demonstrate for a second example. Pretend that this Gladius is like oh, I don't know. Here, pretend that this is the Impulsion. The Impulsor wants to deliver some really important models up to this objective. Well, turn 1, just pretend all of this stuff isn't here. These Seekers are going to do a 9-inch scout move. Cool. They're going to spend 1 CP to walk through the walls and move 14 inches. And then they're going to be at +1 to charge. And they get to reroll charges. Or what they could do is they could just like roll an advance, which they also get to reroll. And they can do something like this, where they can just stand here. And they can just say, actually, you know what? You don't get to move anything in your army turn 1. Because you can't end within 1 inch of me. And if you have like vehicles, guess what? You just lost the game because an 80-point unit put you in jail. Because you don't get to move turn 1, which means Slaanesh gets to 100% grab the entire board, and you don't get to leave. And they're going to have more than one of these units. They're probably going to take 2. Not to mention, they annihilate skirmishing units if you allow them to activate their reroll hit and wound rolls. They're very, very killy against skirmishing units. They suck against like elite infantry and vehicles and stuff. But man, this is what is called jailing. So the way you block those is you have to have scout units of your own. So let's say I have these Seekers right here, and I have, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to grab my scouts here. My Space Marine scouts, just because this is the demonstration I'm going to use, you guys, to protect yourselves from getting jailed. I can put them like here for deployment. Remember, nothing else on the battlefield exists right now, okay? Because I'm just making a point so that you guys can understand how this works. This scout is going to stand right here. Oh, no, he's doing backflips. Cool. You see this where this aura is? They can't end a scout move within 9 inches of you. So that will really seriously turn off a lot of their ability to move. They still would get a 14-inch move, but they would not be able to even, they might be able to land here, but that's not that scary because then they won't be able to make the charge into your Impulsor or block you at all. So you need infiltrators and scouts of your own to block their infiltrators and scouts. If you don't have infiltrators and scouts, you better have great overwatches ready to deal with them. All right, so that's what I meant by you need infiltrators and scouts of your own. I got to go back to the PowerPoint video, and we're going to return to TTS, though. So don't worry, the good is not disappearing. So that's the Seekers, and let's move on to Chariots. There's the deal. There's bunches of different varieties of Chariots. They hit with variety of strengths. But there's nothing to really know about them. I'm going to talk about the Seeker Chariot real quick, just because there's some controversy about it. Now, if you read this thing's ability, it says Side's Impact. Each time this unit makes a charge move until the end of the phase, melee weapons equipped by models in this unit have the Anti-Infantry 4-up ability. Now, Anti-Infantry 4-up with Dev Wounds is very strong, especially when you have 9 attacks, especially when you're rerolling hit and wound rolls. But the problem is, the way this is worded, it says each time a unit makes a charge move until the end of the phase, meaning technically, you can't ever use this ability because you only have Anti-Infantry 4-up until the end of the charge phase. Now, we all know exactly what GW means, but the problem is that GW hasn't updated this. Now, if you're playing in my tournament or you're playing in anything that I'm TOing, like I'll be TOing a tournament out in Sweden here in a few months, we will allow this ability to work the way it's intended to work. But without GW officially fixing it, it officially doesn't work. So I just wanted to like clear that up. Otherwise, all these Chariots, they move 14, they hit with varieties of strength. They're not really the big deals that you need to worry about in this army. It's all the other stuff. Now let's lastly talk about the Soul Grinder, and I'm going to do general strategy. So the Soul Grinder is something that I'm actually really excited that we have to talk about Soul Grinder because it's a badass model, and it's really cool to see it get some love. It is shockingly efficient in the Legions of Excess. Now, this guy is known as Old King Whiff because he has 5 attacks, he hits on 3, strength 16, AP 3, damage D6 plus 2. And that is very strong, but the reality is he's going to miss twice, and then he's going to roll 1 to wound, and then suddenly you take 2 saves. It's AP 3, but you pass 1 of your saves, and nothing dies. That is inevitably what happens with Soul Grinders every single time they run. However, in Legions of Excess, they're going to charge you. They're tough enough to survive you punching them first, and they're going to have full rerolls to hit and wound, potentially with +1 to wound and with sustained hits on both their Iron Claw and their Warp Sword. When they do that, they one-shot Tyrannofexes, just to like let you know how darn devastatingly powerful they are. It is brutal. And luckily, because it is Legion of Excess, these bad boys can also walk through walls if they use the strat. Of course, only one can. Now, there's a reality where you see a Legion of Excess army. I haven't seen it yet, but where you could see them, where they're just running 3 Soul Grinders. They're that dang good in this detachment. And he's also not a monster, so don't forget, Thieves of Pain will work on him. So if you see this guy and you're like, oh, he's exposed, I can just go shoot him to death. And he happens to be within 12 inches of a Daemonette squad that happens to have a 4-up against mortals because they're led by a contorted epitome. They're just going to use Thieves of Pain, and then the Soul Grind is effectively going to take no damage. So watch out for that, because they can use Thieves of Pain on him because he's a vehicle, not a monster. Now, general strategy, okay? General strategy. Here's the way that Slaanesh is really going to work. And then they're going to position themselves for an all-out wall turn. So just think that you're playing orcs, except they don't have any transports. But you cannot allow this. Now, first off, how do you counter this? Well, you can counter it with fast shooting. Of course, that's amazing. But here's the real deal. You can't move block everything in their army because they can walk through walls, ignoring models and stuff on the way. But you can move block everything except for one thing. And you can also always block where your opponent can end their movement. Now, what does that mean? I am going to let me switch to TTS real quick so I can show you what I mean with that. If you guys heard Lily do a little squeal in the background, she agrees. That baby understands that you can move block where people can end. So let's say that we have. I'm just going to move these D-minutes here for a second, and then I'm going to explain. So let's say that we have this Keeper Secrets, and she really wants to charge Mephiston. It's a 9-inch charge, and we know that she can charge through walls, just like this. So you know that with a 9-inch charge, she can fully clear the ruin, right? That is good to know. What I recommend you do is you kind of measure things. You got to measure where they can end up. So let's say this thing is starting up here. You know it moves 14. It's going to end up, I don't know, somewhere like that. Pretend that I moved 14 there. And then in order to get a... all right, it moved 14. And then in order for it to make it all the way through, it's going to need to roll a 9 in order to make it over. Well, you can't stop it from doing this, and you can't stop it from running over your models, but you can stop it from landing. So if you mathematically check where they are, so let's say 9 and then add an extra 14 inches of movement backwards, you can actually end up standing right here. And then even though the model could make it technically through with a 9, they still can't land on you, which means you screened them, even though they can walk through walls. How cool is that? That's super, super strong. And this is too far, and then this is too far. So since they can't land on your model, even though they can walk through walls, they can't make it. That is what I mean when I'm saying you can screen where they can land. All right. Let's hit that PowerPoint back up right now. PowerPoint view. So general strategy. They will also always be battle shocking everything that they can battle shock. Because every time they pass battle shocks, and remember they're at +1 to take battle shocks when they're within their own Shadow of Chaos, they heal D3. Every time you fail it, you'll be at -1, and you take D3 mortal wounds. So they're going to battle shock. Chances are they're going to battle shock every single command phase that they have. Just everything that's within the Shadow of Chaos. As long as there's more than like one unit within a Shadow of Chaos. That's going to turn off Overwatches. That's going to turn off Heroic Interventions. It's going to turn off AOCs. It is brutally efficient. So if you have abilities to buff your leadership battle shocks, if you're playing Blood Angels, for example, you're always going to want to bring down, say, the Sanguine Aura maybe a little bit early, just so that you have his aura of re-roll battle shock test. These abilities are very, very strong, and they can absolutely save you in a pinch. Not every army has access to that. If you're an army that has a lot of transports, you're going to want to stay in transports, because who cares if your transports get battle shocked? The units inside aren't battle shocked. It just doesn't matter, right? All right, so they can kill all your transports. You know, it is what it is. As a matter of fact, what you're going to see is that transports are one of the main ways that you can actually counter this army. So let's get into that now. Oh yeah, and don't forget that one thing I talked to you about, which stratagem was it here? Let me just scroll it. It's the one that turns off shooting. So you have to take a battle check at -1. If you pass it, you're -1 to hit. If you fail it, you just can't shoot. Watch out for that. You never want to dedicate one shooting unit to the one unit that needs to die. You need to give your shooting unit multiple targets just in case they fail the battle shock, and you need to make sure that you've got multiple units that can shoot the unit that needs to die just in case that battle shock has failed. So watch out for that stratagem. All right, the real squeeze. Here it is, guys. Here's how we're going to counter the Legion of Excess. Fights first annihilates this army. Fights first is so brutally efficient into this army that it basically just says Slaanesh is not allowed to play. Because once Slaanesh says they don't take their rerolls to hit and wound, their damage drops by 70 to 80%. It is insane how much the damage drops off. They don't get to fish for sustained hits. They don't get to fish for devastating wounds. It is just massive. So if you are playing World Eaters, Blood Angels, GSC, any Space Marine that has Judiciary units, any army that has these fights first units, Eldar, oh my god, Howling Banshees, murder a lot of the Legion of Excess. if you are running any of these style armies, your opponent can't afford to give up the fights first ability because they're just going to allow your entire army to fight before they will, which is going to, right off the bat, cut their damage by like 60, 70, 80% in some situations. So fights first is insane. As a matter of fact, let me kind of just show you how fights first is. Fights on death is also a huge problem, but let me go to TTS. I'm going to show you how to kind of like set up these fights on death, set up these fights first, those types of things. So I just got to click this little button here. And I know this video is going a little bit long, but it's super important that you guys understand this. I'll probably do videos like this locked behind the members in the future. So hopefully that you guys are enjoying this one because this is a lot of work. So let's say that I have, I don't know, let's say that I have this Blood Angels Primaris Impulsor. And inside of this Blood Angels Primaris Impulsor, I have a unit of Blade Guard Vets. Well, because my opponent who is running the Legion of Excess has no real shooting, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to charge it, say with this 3-man unit of Fiends, and they're going to really have to hope that this 3-man unit of Fiends kills the Impulsor, because they're also going to need to charge it with this big 6-man. Now, if the big 6-man activates first, the Impulsor is going to blow up, then you're just going to get all of the Blade Guard Vets out over here. And basically none of these 3 Fiends are going to get strike. Maybe one will get strike, but you're not going to be able to hit with 2, which is a big problem. Boom. So what they're going to really need to do is they're going to really want to try to get a longer charge like this, try to hit here, and then allow the big squad to pile in and take advantage of, say, like this barricade rule. So as you can see, where I'm positioned with this Impulsor here is brutal for the Legions of Excess. This really screws their game plan up. Look for missions like this, because this is one of the GW maps. I think this is GW4, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember right now. Yeah, it's not GW4, maybe 3. I don't care. It's one of those maps. So watch for little chokeholds like this where you can really screw your opponent where they actually have to charge. Another thing that is super critical is they can't really charge fights first units. So they charge this unit of Blade Guard Vets. These Blade Guard Vets are just going to murder the crap out of the Fiends of Slaanesh. Because these Blade Guard Vets are just going to fight first, and they're going to murder the Fiends' faces off. Maybe one lives, and it's like, okay, cool, it'll kill 1 or 2 Blade Guard Vets, but you don't care because you've devastated that matchup. So, and by the way, this Judiciar is leading them, so it's giving them fights first, right? Or you could have like the enhancement on a chaplain or whatever, right? Lots of different ways that you can do it. If I'm playing Blood Angels, I like the chaplain with fights first. But the point stands is that these fights first units screw up the game plans a absolute ton. Now, another thing that you can do to really screw up people. So one, we've talked about transport locking, right? Because it really, really messes them up. You can find these chokeholds. Transports are just, it's really challenging for Slaanesh to deal with transports. Because then, even if they do kill this, now I'm free to just go murder them. They don't want to pile into me. They don't want to consolidate into me because I'll just murder them in my turn. And then in my turn, now I'm just free to charge them and murder them in my turn, right? So it's a big, big issue because they have no shooting to bop this first. Secondly, the second thing that you really want to deal with is, oh, give me this guy. Let's say that I have this point, and these guys are set up, and this Keeper Secrets has to charge in order to take the objective off. So it's going to charge. It can't charge really through the wall simply because they won't have anywhere to land. So it's just going to charge the JPI right here. Well, I have positioned Dante's squad to Heroic Intervene. So now Dante Heroics intervenes, and the entire Sanguinary Guard squad is going to charge on in. Now the Keeper of Secrets has a big, big issue because the Keeper of Secrets really kind of can't afford to use its full rerolls to hit and wound, because if it does, Dante's squad is just going to activate before it does, and it will murder the Keeper of Secrets. This is because in the fight's normal step, the non-active player will choose the activation first, okay? So Dante would actually activate first here if the Keeper of Secrets chooses to not take the fight's first ability. So this is going to force the Keeper of Secrets to take the fight first ability. Now the Keeper of Secrets won't get any rerolls to hit, any rerolls to wound, and it severely limits the damage output that it's going to have. Maybe it kills 1, maybe it kills 2 Sanguinary Guard, and then Dante's squad will still kill the Keeper of Secrets, most likely. So watch for your heroic interventions to really screw your opponent up, to really force them to not take the fight's first ability. And then watch for these transports to lock them, and because when you have these transports to activation lock them, it doesn't matter how strong a unit is, they can only kill what they can hit. So you can have a 6-man unit of fiends that can kill a Satan, but they won't kill us. It doesn't matter how hard they hit because they're only going to kill an 80-point impulsor. And then my 200-point fights first brick of whatever comes out and murders them in their next turn. So activation lock, fights first units, and heroic interventions are absolutely brutal. Now, there's a few other ways that we're going to deal with it. Let me go back to the TTS or to the PowerPoint view here. So you're looking for a fight on death. So like think orcs or think, Gladius Space Marines, for example. They can charge in, they can murder you, but you're just going to spend whatever CP you need to do and fight on death and murder them back. This forces really bad trades for Slaanesh because they don't trade well because they are expensive. So they don't really want you killing them with fighting on death. And if you're fighting on death, that's also going to give you the opportunity to interrupt in another combat. It's going to be really, really bad for your opponent if you have a lot of CP. So you can't waste your CP. Activation locks absolutely crush them. We're talking about transport heavy lists. These are going to be things like Tau, Orcs, Admech. Like we said, if you kill the transports, then they're kind of screwed. Then uppy, downy shooting is brutal for the Legion of Excess. So if you're playing Vanguard Space Marines, if you're playing Death Watch, if you're playing Bridgehead for the Imperial Guard, which, oh my god, I hate that list. Does anyone else hate that list? I need to do one of these videos on how to counter Bridgehead, which there are ways to counter, by the way, but man, I hate that list. Then you're going to have a big advantage into Legion of Excess. So guys, this is it. This is how you're going to handle it. So just real quick, let me go back to that TTS view just so you can kind of see the things that I have set up here. You want to make sure that you have fights first units positioned to murder. You want to make sure that we are forcing them to charge into these transports. All right, waste your activation killing my transport because then you have nothing that can come and kill my unit that pops out of it. Like the fights first unit of Mephiston over here, he's a problem. Watch your heroic interventions just to screw your opponent over really, really bad. Shooting is always really, really strong against an army that honestly has no defenses against shooting. Just be aware of how skewed the math can get sometimes, especially if so Keeper Secrets are always -1 to be hit. So, all right, you're shooting at it, but it's -1 to be hit. So it goes from hitting on 3s to 4s or 4s to 5s. That's a big problem for a lot of armies. Even if you're playing an army that is notorious for killing them. So let's say I'm playing Orcs and I have a lot of tank busters that are +1 to hit and wound against monsters. Well, I'm +1 to hit, so I'm hitting on 4s, but I'm -1 to hit, so I'm hitting on 5s. It sucks. And then, because my normal ballistic skill is 5 up, they can also do the stratagem, and even if I pass the battle shock, I'll be -1 to hit again. So now I'm hitting on 6s against this model, and I'm just doing absolutely nothing. So you got to really, really watch out for the stratagems they have, where they're going to screw you on the battle shock. For example, if Dante is hanging out right here, and my plan is to heroic whenever this keeper charges in, I better not be battle shocked. And if I don't want to be battle shocked, then I probably need the Sanguinor right next door when this Legions of Excess player is going to force my everything within the Shadow of Chaos to take battle shock. And don't forget, if we're standing like this, everything has to take battle shock because they're all within 6 inches of the keeper. So watch out for those tricks. Guys, if you like this content, seriously, this one takes a lot of time and effort. Hit the like, subscribe, share with your friends. Consider becoming a member because that stuff really, really supports me. That's how I put this stuff out. And I'm probably going to end up putting these videos behind member content, I think. Member locked content. Even though I'll keep all the other stuff free because I do love y'all and I really, really want it to improve the level of Warhammer 40k play across the board. Anyway, with that, I am going to go ahead and close out. Appreciate everybody. Have a wonderful day. Crump on. Bye-bye.